Make a special welcome to our next speaker from Baptist Health, South Florida. We thank her for joining us here, for making the trip and joining us. Dr. Yuliya Linhares is the Chief of Lymphoma Services at the Miami Cancer Institute. She is here to present on how we can optimize our health without medications. Let's give her a warm welcome.
Hello, everyone, and it's my pleasure to present to this audience. This is my first time in Cayman Islands, and I'm delighted to learn about this island, and it was just wonderful to meet people of the island. I can feel what a wonderful, welcoming, and warm community we have at this island. I really hope to be back. It was also a pleasure meeting multiple physicians, healthcare professionals, and just regular people. So thank you so much. So I had a chance to give this lecture, and I was wondering about the topic. I'm a chief of lymphoma services. I treat cancer every day. I treat mostly lymphomas. There's so many exciting new medications out there. But nevertheless, if I just talk about cancer drugs, that wouldn't be applicable to each and every person in this audience. So I wanted to create a talk that would change your lives. So I hope in 1 hour, I'm going to change everybody's life to the better and improve your health, improve your longevity, and lower your cancer risk. So please tune in, if this clicker works. So why am I talking about this again? The lifestyle modifications, changing our lives through lifestyle changes. Well, it's actually because top 10 causes of death in the United States, at least, and also around the world, are not cancer, but other ones as well. So heart disease, cancer, chronic lower respiratory illness, stroke, diabetes mellitus, all of these diseases are potentially affected by our lifestyle. And then 80% of premature deaths are attributed to tobacco, poor diet, and lack of physical activity. So if we think about the key health behaviors, such as not smoking, maintaining healthy weight, consuming 5 fruits and vegetables a day, and also maintaining regular physical activity, only 3% of total population actually have all 4 of these very important health behaviors. And if we eliminate the 4 top risk factors for illnesses, then that would lead to 80% reduction in the risk of the most common deadly and chronic diseases. So really, our health is in our hands. So here is a health study from England. Over 4,000 individuals were followed for 20 years, and they were given points for one of the 4 health behaviors: smoking, eating fruits and vegetables, physical activity, and alcohol. So the risk of death was directly proportional to the number of these adverse health behaviors. And here are the curves. Sorry, that's where the clicker comes in. So, and the individuals who exhibited all 4 of these high-risk health behaviors actually had an all-cause mortality comparable to that of someone who is 12 years older. So if you are maintaining these 4 unhealthy habits, literally you're aging yourself by 12 years. So, and if we talk about applicability to one of the most common cancers, right? So most common cancer in women is breast cancer, and 1 of 8 women, unfortunately, will get breast cancer. These lifestyle factors are extremely important. So it turns out that physical activity level at baseline is associated with longer survival in advanced breast cancer. And why is this so important? I'm saying the word survival. Well, it's because now we have cancer drugs approved based on what's called progression-free survival, meaning, let's say we're using this lung cancer drug, and it makes somebody live without cancer progressing for 3 months longer, and the drug is approved. But guess what? That patient did not live overall longer. So they still, let's say, lived for 12 months, 15 months, and so forth. So here we literally have something that if it were medication, physical activity, if it were, it would be immediately approved by FDA, and you can only imagine what price tag it would have, right? I mean, think about the price tag on insulin, on CAR T cells that cost $450,000, right? And then we have only 30% sustained survival. And here we have exercise that improves overall survival in breast cancer patients. And then if you do a little bit more, right, so a little bit more of exercise, just 1 additional hour per day, that decreases breast cancer mortality by 23% in patients with advanced breast cancer. And then, unfortunately, we do have to say this uncomfortable word, obese. I was thinking to exclude it from the presentation, but it is what it is. High BMI, obesity, unfortunately, is associated with adverse prognosis in breast cancer. And that is why, not because these patients get less treatment, but because actually they respond worse to chemotherapy and to hormonal therapy. They have increased risk of local recurrence of breast cancer due to the metabolic state and hormonal background. Also, they're less likely to undergo breast reconstruction and more likely to sustain adverse side effects with radiation therapy and with surgery. So what do we do to help us with breast cancer risk? My mom had 2 breast cancers, and one of them she had when I was just born. So I know how horrible this affects our life, and so I wanted to have my sons with healthy mom. So if we exercise for 6.5 hours a week, the breast cancer risk is reduced by 30%. And that is just one of those tiny small things we can do to reduce our cancer risk. So why is general health so important for me as an oncologist yet again? Well, it's because it turns out 30 to 40% of cancers worldwide can be prevented through changes in modifiable lifestyle factors. One of them is sedentary life behavior. So sedentary lifestyle is associated with increased risk of colon, endometrial, and lung cancers. So 20 to 40% increase in risk of very common cancers. Increased body fatness is associated with 13 different cancers, most common ones. And then the opposite of that, physical activity and maintaining healthy BMI helps us reduce risk of most common cancers. And now a little bit of biochemistry, and that's for physicians in the audience and whoever is interested in it. So why is that the case? Well, so what happens is when we're overweight and our physical activity is down, sedentary behaviors, we accumulate adipose tissue. And really, what is adipose tissue? It's not just an energy storage depot. It's not just there to protect us from cold or help us survive. It's actually an organ. It's a very active biochemical metabolic organ. So the adipose tissue has influence on the rest of our body, and the influences are multiple. So one of the pathways is change in metabolism overall. So the more fatty tissue we have, the more insulin resistant we are, exacerbating metabolic syndrome. Additionally, adipose tissue produces pro-inflammatory cytokines, pro-inflammatory chemicals. So really, obesity and metabolic syndrome are diseases of inflammation, and it's shown in multiple studies. Additionally, adipose tissue is associated with controlling of something called sex hormone binding globulin. So it's a very important protein that binds estrogens and androgens, so binds our sex hormones. And the thing is, if you don't have enough of this protein, then you have all these loose hormones circulating in your body. And really, when you have too high of a level of testosterone or of estrogens, that's what lead and predispose you to various cancers, such as breast cancer. So all these processes, when we have increased adipose tissue, lead to cancer risk and vice versa. By decreasing adiposity, we decrease cancer risk. So additionally, again, as an oncologist, why am I talking about this? And how did I even think of this, right? Well, it's because I have and I see my patients, I treat them in clinic every day. And so when I start treating them, I have to think of them getting through chemo successfully, right? So when I look at the patients who have cardiovascular disease, they have diabetes or neuropathy or kidney disease or depression, I know they're not going to do as well, because actually then they're predisposed more to subsequent organ damage, to heart failure with our drugs, to fatty liver, to more neuropathy, to more depression, and then it feeds back to subsequently exacerbate their pre-existing conditions. So it really goes both ways. And yes, actually overall, unfortunately, I kind of tell when I taught residents, medical students, I said, hey, we're very likely to get cancer. You know, I may get cancer, I'm not bulletproof, but you know what, I wanna be ready for it. So if I get cancer, I wanna get my full drug doses, and I don't want heart failure, and I don't want neuropathy. When we have people who have these pre-existing conditions, for example, acute lymphoblastic leukemia is treated with drugs like vincristine, right, or steroids. So if we're unable to give full doses of these drugs, then we're unable to cure these cancers. So it's very important to have good metabolic health. So, and again, you think, okay, just I'm saying it's important. Well, White House says it's important. So actually in September, they're giving this conference on hunger, nutrition, and health, and they're giving billions of dollars, and I promise you, I didn't get a penny from that, you know, 4 billion. And also, Mr. Biden did not recruit me to talk here, but they're giving billions of dollars to fight these maladies of the modern age. And the American College of Lifestyle Medicine is actually giving free CME to teach physicians the lifestyle modifications and food as medicine. And so again, because of all this, I myself got additional board certification last year in lifestyle medicine. So in addition to internal medicine, hematology, and oncology, I'm now board certified in lifestyle medicine. What lifestyle medicine is about is treating and preventing illnesses with lifestyle modifications. So, okay, now everybody is back from lunch. I hope everybody's awake, so now we can really talk about what I want to talk, not the background. So, really, in the last 33 years, the prevalence of overweight and obesity increased by 28% in adults, and even more so, 47% in children. So why did that happen, right? I mean, are we different? No, we're not different. Our genetic code is the same. As a matter of fact, you know, it's very close to Neanderthal, right? So there's barely difference between us and even pigs if you compare the genomes. But then why? What happened to us? And then we'll look at this guy, right? So he was kind of in a bad shape, and then he's here. So is that a different person? Something changed with the code, with the DNA? No, nothing changed here. So how did he do it? So, and what he did has to do a lot with us modifying our genome. So what it is our DNA is very flexible, right? So as you remember, DNA consists of genes that code for RNA and then protein expression, right? So that is set in stone unless you do some kind of mutagenesis, right? And that leads to cancers as well. But it is not really set in stone because there are multiple modifications of DNA that can change what we call expression patterns. So, and modifications can be methylation of DNA, so it really shuts it off, it shuts it down for use. DNA is wound on these little spools here, and those are histone proteins. So histones can be modified via, again, methylation and acetylation. And again, it either opens or closes DNA for use. So those are the two modifications. And then the third one is a really cool one that I really like, is in microRNAs. So basically, here's the paradigm. We have DNA, and then from DNA, the RNA is translated, and then RNA is translated into protein. So, but our DNA actually makes this little microRNAs. They're kind of like little Velcros that bind to messenger RNA and neutralize it. So that's another way to control the expression of our genes, right? So the three main epigenetic modifications that control the expression of genes on our DNA are DNA methylation, histone modifications, and microRNAs. So, and here is a little graphic. This is the way I like to explain epigenetics to my residents and medical students. So imagine DNA is a rope with different parts, right? Let's say we have green, orange, green, orange, green, orange, right? So those are UF colors, by the way. Right? So if we modify this orange parts, and via modification we close them off, then literally now we have a green rope, right? So the orange parts are still there, but they're just not seen. They're not active. And here is the other way about. Here we have our rope, and we modify the green parts, and they're shut off, and here you are. Now you're an orange rope, right? The green is there, but we just don't see it. So basically, you can choose which rope you want to be. You're not really committed to your genetic code. We are able to change this gene expression and become what we want to be. So what he did is he changed his epigenetics. And so basically, therefore, when we look at obesity as a state, it really is not a reflection of our outer self. It doesn't matter. Looks don't matter. You know, it's not about body image. It's not about culture. It's about our inner health. So really, our body composition is a reflection of our epigenetic health. And here you go. There are actually multiple scientific studies. So here you are with this guy, right? This is what he was doing. I'm not sure he knew about it, but that's what he did. So there are multiple studies showing us that there are multiple abnormally methylated, so shut off, genes in obesity, such as insulin sensitivity, energy metabolism genes, lipid metabolism genes, genes for the hormones that control appetite, genes for hypoxia response, inflammation, and oxidative stress. So how do we gain epigenetic control? And believe it or not, I think there is a formula. And I have to say, I did create this graphic, so I created the formula. But really, these components, they're all keystones of the lifestyle medicine teaching. Because it turns out, so all these common things that we do, so our diet, our sleep, toxins in our food, physical activity, stress, and micronutrients, they all affect epigenetics. So what we can do is really go from potentially a lifestyle that predisposes us to cancer and metabolic syndrome to metabolic health. So then the recipe, right? Because we can talk about what's important, but really we need to know why it's important and how do we gain control. So first I wanted to talk about sleep because everybody gets excited about diet, everybody gets excited about physical activity, but really we forget about sleep. So sleep actually is very epigenetically active. So sleep deprivation leads to disruption of circadian clock genes, and here they are, the clock and BMAL genes. And believe it or not, so these genes control DNA expression of multiple other genes, and literally there are epigenetic modifiers. So they epigenetically modify via generating new microRNAs, histone acetylation and methylation, DNA methylation, which leads to changing expression profiles of multiple genes. Actually, in some studies, 711 genes are variably expressed due to sleep. And if we're sleep deprived, that all leads to these modifications, increase in cortisol, and subsequent high blood pressure, metabolic syndrome, diabetes, and obesity. And in one study, actually only one night of sleep deprivation led to glucose intolerance. Only one night. So how do we improve our sleep? So this is the best slide, but this is where the money is. So first, I want to give credit for this slide to my wonderful life partner, Scott Lackey, who is here, because he is the one who taught me these techniques. Because I had insomnia for all my life. I was a medical student, I was in residency, fellowship. How do you think people get through it? Of course, on 4 to 5 hours of sleep, right? And then you acquire that deleterious habit and you think that's normal and that's how everybody does it. Well, when you're trying to have a family, that's not that healthy. And when you have a partner who is actually a technologist and computer person and researches everything, then you get help, right? So family can be your doctor. So, if we go into the mechanistic of things, so I haven't mentioned melatonin, right? So here you go. So we're blocking our blue light because it turns out that it's actually the blue spectrum light that signals to our brain, here to suprachiasmatic nucleus, which influences the production of melatonin, which actually has the feedback back to suprachiasmatic nucleus affecting our circadian rhythms and, of course, all those epigenetic modifications that I talked about. So it turns out that the blue blocking glasses can be very effective in helping us to not suppress that melatonin production with blue light. There were multiple studies, but some of them demonstrated that the teenagers, for example, who wore LED, so blue blocking glasses, had improved attention and alertness, and also had improved insomnia. So one of the things you can do is order your blue blocking glasses from Amazon. So other one, that's why I have Amazon for credits there for pictures, right? It's that easy. So the other one is the weighted blanket. So again, I actually have a weighted blanket, but then you want to see, does it really work? Well, I can tell you, yes, it works. And the glasses work too, because of course I've been spreading this teaching, because you can say, okay, well, right? Nobody believes that non-medical things will work, but they do work. So it turns out that weighted blankets actually increase melatonin production. So unclear why, but that's what studies demonstrate. So then other things, so I'm going to mention valerian, and that's a cultural, so I come from Eastern Europe. So valerian has been used for centuries in many countries, in Europe, in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, for sleep. There are multiple studies. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative, but in general, the consensus is yes, it can improve sleep quality. And you know what? Let's believe our grandmas. They had a good life, and they had better health. They used valerian, my mom used valerian, and she did well. So at least it doesn't have any side effects. It's not addictive. It also maybe it's placebo. You know what? Placebo effect is 60% on many things, like even headaches. But it doesn't have any side effects. So I think it's completely fine. It's a good tool to use to help with your sleep. And the other one, very interesting one, is sour cherries. So believe it or not, sour cherries contain melatonin. So if you have some cherries around and you have trouble sleeping, eat a bag of cherries in the evening, and you will fall asleep. I can guarantee you that. And there are, again, multiple studies on that. And of course, what happens with the studies is that a lot of times in the studies, people study extracts, right? There's no money in studying cherries. No one is going to study eating a bag of cherries at night. But I'm not here to advertise for supplements. Nothing that I say is about supplements. Everything that I say is about whole foods, because we're not made to eat supplements. And as a matter of fact, in many studies, they're deleterious and not effective. So we have to actually think of the way where we came from and how we can change it all via whole foods and wholesome lifestyle modifications. So other things that we have to remember, toxins, right? And the most common ones are the ones from plastics. So it turns out that the obesity epidemic coincided with Industrial Revolution. And Industrial Revolution coincided with the advent of plastics. And we all hear about BPA, phthalates, right? But then we kind of forget about it. And why do we forget about it? You know why? Because it's not in the news. Because plastics lobby is not going to allow to have water bottles in the news, right? There's no benefit to anyone for us to not use plastics. But it turns out that these compounds are all over the place. They are what's called environmental obesogens. And because they actually, so if you can tell, if you know a little bit of chemistry, right, these are aromatic compounds. So basically this ring here makes it possible for these compounds to penetrate into our blood and inside the cells. And actually, structurally, if you can see, a lot of our hormones have similar ring, right? So these compounds actually affect our epigenetics and are called endocrine disruptors. It's another name for them. So BPA is associated with metabolic syndrome, visceral obesity, and insulin resistance. And that's from the studies that measured levels of BPA in the urine and blood and these conditions. Also associated with higher BMI in children. Phthalates make plastics soft, and they have estrogenic, anti-androgenic effect, also associated with metabolic syndrome and obesity, and even are possible carcinogens. And then other important compounds are pesticides, so they're organochlorine and organophosphate pesticides, and they actually accumulate in adipose tissue because they're fat soluble. They again have epigenetic action, and they can cause lasting metabolic disruption from early life exposure, and that's actually from mouse studies. And they contribute to global rise again in obesity and diabetes. So what do we do? You know what to do, right? So just try to reduce plastic use, and it also will be good for our planet. Actually, it turns out a lot of things I'm talking about here are very good for the planet as well. So other things, stress, right? We're looking at this slide, and maybe I'm stressing you out a little bit, even with this, with this color here, so we're going to make it better for a second. There you go, much better. So again, little epigenetic modification. Color has an effect on your well-being as well, right? So stress also mediates metabolism. And there is acute stress, and there is chronic stress. So with acute stress, we activate our adrenaline and fight-or-flight response. Blood pressure goes up, your bronchioles dilate, right? You're ready to run. So it feels kind of good. But what happens when our stress is chronic? So actually, with chronic stress, we produce more of these hormones called mineralocorticoids and corticosteroid hormones, glucocorticoids, which leads to retention of fluid and to basically alteration of metabolism, again causing insulin resistance. And how does it do it? So one of the very important pathways is that these hormones affect different types of fatty tissue. So in our body, there are two types of fatty tissue. So one is called BAT, so brown adipose tissue. So actually in adults, there is very little BAT. It's gone by adulthood for most. And what BAT is the fatty tissue that's ready to use its stores, right? It actually is like a little oven. So these brown adipose cells actually use lipids and burn them and regulate what's called thermogenesis, right? They help us maintain our body temperature. And then there is white adipose tissue, which is just basically storage. So that's what we don't want. And it turns out that white adipose tissue can actually convert to not brown, but what we call beige adipose tissue. So when white converts to the active adipose tissue, it's called beige adipose tissue. So basically what happens with stress is that literally we get so-called bleaching of beige adipocytes. So they become white. So it's like coral bleaching, right? So stress bleaching, right? So being bleached out. And there is more inflammation in that brown adipose tissue, or beige adipose tissue. There is death of those very valuable adipocytes. So all that we don't want. But at the same time, this white adipose tissue thrives in condition of stress, and the white adipose cells become big and hypertrophied. And also, the special hormone is upregulated, and this is 11-beta HSD1 hormone that actually converts cortisone to cortisol, so inactive steroid hormone to active steroid hormone, further contributing to the stressful condition. And all these metabolic changes lead to inflammation, again, inflammatory cytokines, and subsequently to all these modulations of transcription factors. So again, whoever is in biochemistry will know about Jun kinase and of kappa B. So very important transcription factors that lead to inflammation, insulin resistance, and further adiposity. So what do we do? Again, I do need to give you a recipe, right? It's all not that bad. So it turns out there's some very simple things. So one thing, it turns out technology use actually increases your cortisol levels and inflammation. We are upregulating interleukin-6. Increases your dopamine levels in little bursts so that they're increased temporarily, but actually overall dopamine gets depleted. So literally your graph of dopamine on social media goes like this. So, right, little spike down, little spike down, little spike down. That's why social media is so horrible for people with ADHD. Their dopamine is already very low, right? And then you're squeezing it out and basically just leaving the person's brain dry. Stress, right? So what should we do then? And there you go. Just turn off your notifications, right? That easy. Check your social media, whatever, when you want to check it, not when it wants to be checked. Delete apps that you don't need, right? I mean, I'm guilty of that. I have 40 apps on my phone. It's ridiculous, right? But this is very simple. And just give it a break. Turn off your phone. So the other one is meditation, and again, everybody says meditate, right? And it seems like it's this hippie thing, California. By the way, I did live in California for 10 years, probably hence this presentation as well. And yes, I do meditate 3 times a week for an hour. So what is it really about? Well, it turns out that the studies demonstrate that meditation decreases cortisol levels, blood glucose, even hemoglobin A1C, which is a marker of your glucose state over time, and heart rate. And then the last thing to do, okay, you don't have time to meditate. You don't want to turn off your phone. But at least have a dinner together with your family. Because again, it turns out that the studies demonstrate, if you don't believe me, that just having social time already decreases cortisol. And actually, they did studies on family meals. And those studies demonstrate that with family meals, both parents and children have greater self-esteem, the depressive symptoms go down, they have better family function, and overall that leads to better nutrition and better weight maintenance in our children. So, and now it leads me to the next one, right? So after the family meal, what do? We have to get moving, right? So it turns out, again, physical activity, same thing, same pattern, everything is connected. So when we're laying around on the couch with our social media in the hand, that actually directly epigenetically modifies our genes through an activity, reducing insulin sensitivity, energy metabolism, impairing mitochondrial function. So mitochondria are these little batteries we have in our cells that generate energy. So we're directly affecting mitochondria with this behavior. And we impair our homeostasis. But with various types of exercise, there is actually epigenetic changes in DNA methylation of 63 genes. And this is just one study, right? I mean, there are tens of thousands of studies on this. And with exercise, we're actually increasing basal energy expenditure. So not only when we exercise, but in general, right? So your 1 hour of exercise will go very far because you're increasing your basal metabolic rate. We are actually down-regulating genes associated with obesity and diabetes, right? So when you're exercising, just imagine, right? It's not that you're burning calories right now. It goes much further than that. You're actually changing your body from the inside out to help you get in the shape that is more beneficial for your health. Exercise also affects fatty acid metabolism. So even more so, if we participate of 60 minutes of acute endurance training or 10 minutes of acute exercise, so that, right, if you want a recipe, how much of exercise, that actually increases the expression of certain microRNAs. Remember our little friends, our little Velcro friends that help us regulate genes? So it changes the expression of microRNAs. So if you don't like exercising, at least you can envision yourself being a friend of microRNA and how you're changing your body. And again, those microRNAs are the ones that help us with mitochondrial function and fatty acid oxidation and insulin sensitivity and so forth. And if we're doing long-term endurance training, it actually restores methylation profile in DNA. So again, sometimes what happens is, not sometimes, but often, actually globally, our DNA is marked with a faulty pattern. It actually is very common in cancers. When we look at global DNA modifications, basically you can have a cell that was normal, but then the good genes are shut off and bad genes are all expressed. And we even have cancer medications now that exploit that. I use cancer drugs myself for leukemia, where the drug does not kill leukemia cells, but it literally transforms leukemia cell from cancer cell to normal cell. I had a patient who had all blasts, which are leukemia cells in blood. Then I give this new drug that we have, epigenetic modifier, and then in a couple of months, he had all normal cells in the blood. They were visibly normal, but if we genetically type them, they were all cancer cells. So it really works. So here with exercise, we're doing the same. So we're restoring the normal patterns in our cells. And some of them are calcium signaling, glucose transporters, and so forth. So other very important metabolic pathways leading to, again, improved insulin sensitivity and improved lipid metabolism. And now to diet, right? Because that's, of course, what everybody has been waiting for. So again, not big news now, because you know what this presentation is about. High-fat diet actually changes expression of over 6,000 genes. 6,000 genes, and that's from the laboratory studies. And among them, of course, are genes responsible for mitochondria, which is cellular respiration, inflammation, cancer, reproduction, skeletal muscle function, and appetite regulation as well. But it goes even further. So when they do studies in maternal nutrition, so if the mothers are not eating correctly, right, and they're having high-fat diet or inadequate nutrition, it actually changes expression, so epigenetically modifies maternal and fetal genes. So we have now offspring that are predisposed to obesity and abnormal lipid profiles and fatty liver and insulin resistance, right? So really these faulty dietary patterns propagate unhealthy metabolism through generations. So I hope that epigenetic diet is going to be the diet of the future, right? And so now when we think about our menu, we're going to think epigenetically, right? When we eat, we're going to think, okay, what am I doing for myself when I'm eating this food, right? What am I changing? So, and here are some very interesting compounds that can change our DNA expression. So one of them is resveratrol in grapes. And that it improves cardiovascular metabolic functioning, improves hepatic steatosis, which is fatty liver, insulin sensitivity, and so forth. The other one, very simple one, so green tea. Green tea has catechins and polyphenols, again, that cause epigenetic modifications that lead to reduced body weight, improved insulin sensitivity, and so forth. So a cup of green tea and a little bit of grapes. The other ones that are interesting are isoflavones from soybeans, again, connected to healthy body weight modulation, healthy lipid profiles, and insulin sensitivity. And again, I would like to remark that there are many studies, and there are a lot of studies of supplements that just don't work. But if you look at epidemiologic studies, basically of certain cultures consuming these products, then we see positive associations. So I'm not asking you to buy resveratrol in capsules or green tea capsules, but just think, because we are wholesome organisms, we're whole humans, so we have to think about macro compounds that we eat. Plus, it's much cheaper, especially now with inflation. So the other one, so these are my favorites. So curcumin, right? I mean, everybody loves curry. I love curry. And I tend to think that basically what we love is usually good for us, unless someone makes us love it, like putting perfumes in hamburgers, right? We don't really like them when they're not perfumed with all this additional additives. They're not that good, but almost everyone loves curry. So turmeric is in curry, and it increases fatty acid oxidation and suppresses expression of inflammatory genes. The other ones are organosulfurs from cruciferous vegetables. So cruciferous are cabbages, so the other name for the family is Brassicaceae, right? So the other one that has organosulfurs is garlic, so basically stinky ones, right? Well, it turns out that sulfur, those compounds in the stinky food, they're good for us. So you can do your own cruciferous crusade. So, and that way suppress your adipogenesis and inflammation. So I have to say, in real life, every weekend what I do is I cut up a big head of cauliflower and I roast it. So Saturday, Sunday, it's just around for all the family as a snack, right? So instead of snacking on a little candy, you can just snack on little roasted florets of cauliflower, and it's great. So, so the other one is vitamin D. So it's the last one of these components, so minerals, right? Of course, now that you know that everything is connected, everything changes DNA expression profile. So of course, magnesium and calcium and vitamin C and vitamin B12 and vitamin B6, they're all important. They're all epigenetic modifiers. But in regards to supplements, a lot of patients ask me, so, what about vitamins? Which one should I take? And I always mention vitamin D. Vitamin D is extremely important in oncology. And the reason why is because it actually is a hormone. So here is a synthesis, right? It starts with a prohormone in the skin, and then liver synthesizes a more active version, and then kidney converts vitamin D to this final and active version of 125 calcitriol, right? So that's the active version. And guess what? It turns out it penetrates cellular membrane and binds to vitamin D receptor that is on DNA. So your vitamin D goes directly to your DNA, and it affects expression profile of multiple genes that are important for your health. So it's not just something for healthy bones. Vitamin D is actually connected to multiple processes, to inflammation, to brain health, to metabolism. So it turns out that people with increased body mass index are more prone to vitamin D deficiency, and the studies are done. What also is very important for oncologists in this audience is that low vitamin D levels are prevalent in multiple cancers, so colon, breast, leukemias. It actually turns out that vitamin D deficient patients with lymphomas respond worse to Rituxan-containing regimens. And also there is another study demonstrating that vitamin D deficient Hodgkin's patients have decreased survival and chemoresponsiveness. I'm a transplanter as well, and I'm also in charge of cellular therapy at Miami Cancer Institute. And believe it or not, when I was talking about vitamin D and routinely checking it in all my lymphoma patients, a lot of people laughed. They see Dr. Linhares, haha, are you going to treat them with vitamin D? Well, guess what? 2 months ago, an article came out that demonstrated that patients with low vitamin D levels had lower response to this revolutionary therapy for lymphomas called chimeric antigen receptor T cells. So they actually had lower complete response rates. So it's an incredible modulator. So when I have patients come into my clinic at the first visit, I check their vitamin D level. And guess what? At my institution, and this is my personal research, 28% of patients are deficient in vitamin D. And so I believe that partially fantastic outcomes I have in my clinic are attributed to this wholesome treatment and possibly vitamin D. So ask your doctor to check your vitamin D level. So here you go. Now you know what to do, right? So we're going to modify our diet, our sleep. We're going to exclude toxins. We'll remember about micronutrients. We'll manage stress and physical activity. But you know what? There is something else. Elephant in the room is microbiome. So we completely forgot, and I didn't mention that a human body is not alone. So what we are, we're holobionts. So holobiont means that you are a community. So you're not alone. You're actually a community. You're a vessel for a whole community of microorganisms. And these microorganisms are connected to all these functions. They actually communicate through your metabolism with your brain. And various microbial patterns in your gut are associated with depression and insomnia and stress and metabolic syndrome and many other things. So how does it work? Well, it turns out that our gut microbiota, the bacteria in our gut, actually produce precursors to serotonin, such as tryptophan and tryptamine. So precursors to serotonin, they also influence serotonin production in the gut. I'm not even sure if you knew that our gut actually makes serotonin, and our gut actually has serotonin receptors. Serotonin is a major chemical in neuronal signaling and is very important in depression, as you know. Right, so it turns out that actually our gut is the main serotonergic organ. So our microbes also make something called MAMPs. So MAMPs are microbial-associated molecular patterns. So it's basically a certain set of molecules that act upon toll-like receptors here and also influence the serotonin secretion and production. And also, our microbes produce something called short-chain fatty acids, and I'll talk about it more. Short-chain fatty acids that are extremely important, are in themselves are epigenetic modifiers. And so via this modulation of serotonin secretion and metabolism, our microbiome communicates with our brain, and then, of course, in return, our brain is able to further modulate multiple functions of metabolism and mood and so forth. So again, I'm just talking, but actually there are a lot of studies dedicated to this. So these are not just theories or words. So major journals are publishing on this topic. So Nature, which is one of the major scientific journals, is publishing on the gut microbiota and host metabolism. Nature, another article, human gut microbiome is associated with obesity. Another article from Cell, microbiota and sleep. In case you didn't believe me, what do our bacteria have to do with sleep? Then we have Frontiers of Endocrinology, right? The microbiota gut-brain axis article. Then we're talking about, again, Nature journal, talking about how to leverage diet to engineer the gut microbiome. And then additional publications on BPA. So again, remember the slide how everything is connected? Well, it turns out that BPA from plastic actually impairs cognitive function because it alters microbiome, in turn altering serotonin pathways. And physical activity is associated with different types of microbiomes as well. So if you do a search on PubMed, which is our official scientific engine, 47,000 results come up when you look up microbiome and health. That's how important it is. But here we go. So I was looking for a graphic for this presentation, this graphic, right? Oh, so now we understand how important microbiome is, right? And we have to think more about it. And you know where this graphic is from? Purina website. So it turns out that Purina, right, wants to provide microbiome-centric intervention for pet health, and that's the main thing on their website. Has your doctor ever talked to you about your microbiome? Have you thought about your microbiome? So basically, why are we not involved? So let's think about our microbiome. So microbiome is flexible, and there's evidence to it. We can manipulate it. So this is a very famous study. It's one of the key studies in microbiome. And basically what it did is it demonstrated that microbial diversity is the greatest in people prior to immigration to the US, various species. And then as they progress through their life and generations in the United States, the microbial diversity actually goes down. And this reduced microbial diversity is associated, of course, with obesity and metabolic syndrome, right? And the change in microbiome is so that the percentage of Prevotella, which digests fiber, goes down, but then the Bacteroides, other type of bacteria, go up. So basically, here's your direct association. And then we'll have to remember about fiber. So if we think about the names, right, because you would think, well, which bacteria are good and which bacteria are bad. So I'm not going to talk about bad bacteria because there's just too much information and we don't care about them. What we want is we really want to foster the good guys. Well, it turns out that for me, I'm not a microbiologist. There are just so many and the names are very complicated. I can't even pronounce them. But if you want to remember some of them, so one is Roseburia species, and Roseburia species are important. They modulate inflammation, and they're major producers of that short-chain fatty acid that's very important, butyrate. And the other one that you should remember is Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. So Faecalibacterium prausnitzii. So it's a very important microbe in our gut. It's one of the main ones. And it's very important for anti-inflammatory action and is a major producer of these short-chain fatty acids, and one of them being butyrate. And actually, butyrate is a histone deacetylase inhibitor. And again, if you're a physician and an oncologist, you actually know that we use histone deacetylase inhibitors as drugs to treat cancers. And here you go. Actually, our bacteria produces our very own histone deacetylase inhibitor that massively affects DNA expression, causes epigenetic modifications, and modulates inflammation and immunity and metabolism and our brain health. So how do we feed these guys? It turns out that they're compounds called prebiotics. So prebiotics are substrates that are selectively utilized by microorganisms to benefit our health, right? So they feed the good guys. The ones that have the most action are oligosaccharides in the category of non-digestible fiber. So the idea is that you're eating fiber that you can't digest, but these little guys, the bacteria can digest it, and they eat it and they thrive on it, right? And then they convert this fiber to these short-chain fatty acids. So among these compounds, galacto-oligosaccharides, and those are in lentils, chickpeas, and beans. So what I have in my house is I have 3 rice cookers. So 3. So one has lentils every day. It keeps them nice and warm, so my kids have lentils every day. And again, this is a result of, of course, research and so forth, but personal experience, because my little kid has brain-gut disorder, so cyclical abdominal pain syndrome, and he couldn't eat anything in the morning, so he'd always be sick, he'll have belly pain, he'd be skipping school. And so what I did, I was like, okay, let's just try for you to eat lentils every day. And this is before this lecture and before I looked this up. And so once he started that habit, actually he stopped having these episodes of severe abdominal pain and kind of depression and so forth. And then I was like, wait a second, let me actually look this up, let me see whether this food was medicinal for him. And again, maybe not, it's an anecdote. I'm a physician, and I don't believe in anecdotes. But at the same time, we say, first, do not harm. I really don't know anyone who harmed himself or herself with eating lentils. So the next one is inulin, and that's in chicory root. I think chicory is more popular in England, but I don't encourage you eating chicory roots, but they do make supplements out of it. But onions are very common. The other one is fructooligosaccharides, and those are in garlic, asparagus, bananas, and artichokes. Other type of sugar is arabinoxylan in whole cereal grains. So when you're choosing your cereal, you really want something that's not shelled, right? Not like white polished rice, but something that has that outside layer. So buckwheat, my parents are from Ukraine. That's the main producer of buckwheat. Also amazing superfood for that. Then pectin and pectic oligosaccharides. So one of the main vegetables, fruits we know with pectin is apple, right? Remember, eating apple a day keeps the doctor away. So actually it's because apples contain these prebiotic compounds. And then the other interesting ones are azomalto-oligosaccharides, and those are contained in miso and in honey, so also interesting. So the other ones you've seen already are polyphenols, so yet again that green tea, and again red grapes, and also seaweed and algae have some prebiotics such as fucoidan and lemur and so forth. So, and of course you can look this all up, right? This lecture is just for you to think about these things, and then now in the information age, all information is out there for you. You just have to think and remember about these things. And intermittent fasting, of course, right? So everybody is talking about intermittent fasting. Does it really work? How does it work? Well, it turns out that it really does work. And you know what? It's completely fine to skip breakfast. And again, complete anecdote, but I have never eaten breakfast in my entire life. And it's because I was traumatized by kindergarten breakfast in the Soviet Union where I grew up. So and and I'm standing here, so you're gonna be all right if you skip that bacon and eggs. And how does it work? Well, it turns out that the periods of intermittent fasting actually change your microbiome composition, and the microbes that are upregulated, that thrive in those conditions, make acetate and lactate, which converts white fat, and we talked about it, this immobile storage depot of fat, to beige fat, which is the fat that is able and wants to burn calories, right? So basically, when we're doing this intermittent fasting, we're changing our microbiome and we're converting white fat to beige fat, and it's all very beneficial for our metabolism. So in addition to intermittent fasting, there are multiple studies demonstrating that there are some foods that also cause beiging of white fat, and that's curcumin, capsaicin, and hot peppers. And interestingly, research is showing that they're pain pathways. So it's like with pain, you're gonna get all excited, right? Maybe your muscles contract a little bit, you're a little bit so hyperventilating, so there's this adrenaline coming in. So it's a similar biochemical pathway with capsaicin and hot pepper. Then green tea and coffee again, and grapes. And then other process, so other variable that we can control, but not here in Cayman Islands, is cold. So actually cold changes the white fat to beige fat, and they even have studies on cooling. So it's like, well, how do you do it? So there's one study showing that basically spending about 10 minutes at 12 degrees Celsius, you produce generation of beige fat from white fat in humans. So not terrible cold exposure, but something quite tolerable. So here you go. Just remember, I made this graphic and it took me a lot of time, so that's why I'm showing it for the third time. So it's called your health mandala. So if you remember this, I don't know how you will remember it. You can make a tattoo. I can share it with you. So you will live longer. Your cancer risk will be down. And I think you'll be a little bit happier as well via serotonin production in your gut. So it's all connected. So, and of course, we have to walk hand in hand. I can't do this without you, right? When I talk to my patients at the first visit, I always say, we're partners. Right? I'm not authority. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I can only arm you with knowledge, and I can give you the best care, but it's really 50-50. So, all of us, we have to do our 50%. And that's, and the 50% is really the principles of lifestyle medicine: nutrition, exercise, rest, and social connectivity, which all leads to these epigenetic modifications and improved metabolic health. So at MCI, we're ahead of the curve. I'm not going to just say all these things and not do any research, right, and not find out more. So actually, we have a research project in our hematology clinic. So first, in order to introduce this lifestyle modifications best, we need to know our population. So we're analyzing our clinic population for the prevalence of lifestyle modifiable illnesses, and actually our abstract was accepted to the Lifestyle Medicine Conference in Orlando, where I'm going in a couple of weeks to present our data. Right away, I can tell you it's very important to have these lifestyle modifications because only 29% of our patients are in the healthy weight bracket. So also, to make it all doable, this is not all just words. We're introducing the automatic dot phrases that are basically prompts on how to counsel on lifestyle modifications and how to document them. Because I'm busy in clinic, right? And I want to remember what to say, how to say it, and I want to put it in the chart. So if my patient tells me, Dr. Linhares, you didn't tell me about it, I say, no, I did. And here it is in the chart, and I'm going to say it again and again. And actually, all these interventions in lifestyle really do work. It just takes a doctor-physician-patient relationship. And it turns out that oncologists and patients have the closest relationship. It takes a lot of trust. And therefore, I want to use this trust in changing my patient's life, not just curing their cancer, but instead of taking away years of life, potentially with chemotherapy that ages you, I want to give you years of not just life, but healthy and happy life and active life. And I couldn't do it alone. So at MCI, we have incredible supportive services. So because the keystone of lifestyle medicine is really collaboration, right? So not only we collaborate with our microbiome, but I collaborate with my wonderful colleagues with physical medicine and rehabilitation, nutrition, we have massage, we have acupuncture, we have survivorship, we have psychiatry. So we're really not there to just give you chemo and give you different scans, right? But we use every opportunity to improve your epigenetic background, your microbiome, and convert your white fat to the beige fat. And thank you.